It's gonna be good. Hey everybody, welcome back. I am here today with a good friend of mine, B, and we are going to be discussing Late to the Search Party by Stephen Espada Dawson, the poet laureate of Madison, which is where we go to school, and some other poems that you are interested in, and some of your poetry. So yeah, should be super fun. We went to Stephen's release party a month or two ago.
That reading, the release, was the first time I ever cried at a poetry reading.
Really?
Yeah, so that one was like nuts. He's able to like capture what grief feels like, even like 10 years later, you know, still having all these moments that are so intimate and like specific to him and his brother and him and his mother. Something that I like really commend because yeah, I feel like those things only come with time.
Yeah, so we should say, like, I guess the title Late to the Search Party is kind of implies it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of mainly about his brother, his mother and brother, but it kind of revolves around this story that's introduced in the first poem, and like we're not going to say anything that isn't in the collection, but that his like brother went missing, was addicted to drugs at a point in time, and kind of the idea of like, is he out there, is he not? Reckoning with like grieving somebody who you never got like closure around their death is a really interesting topic to explore. Yeah, kind of how this collection becomes his collection when so many of the poems are focused on his brother and his mother. I think he takes a really interesting approach when it comes to that. So we'll discuss a couple poems. Was it the last one that made you cry, or what? Do you remember which one?
I actually I wish I remembered exactly which one it was. All just so damn good. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start crying. Yeah, anyways.
The first and last one are both really good, and I think we'll talk about both of those.
Yeah.
Do you want to read the first one?
Sure, I can read it. A river is a body running. The first time I found my brother overdosed, he looked holy, a thing not to be touched. Yellow halo of last night's dinner. His skin blanched blue, fresco, patron saint of smack. A cop, flustered, tugged up his shorts, plunged a needle into a pale thigh. He hissed awake like a soda can. The paramedic spoke softly in his ear like a lover, asked him what color yellow and red make. What is the difference between a lake and a river? In the corner, I whittled that used syringe into an instrument only I can play.
Yeah, that's crazy. Hissed awake like a soda can is just such a crazy line.
Yeah, I think he does such a good job at using really fresh like images. Hissed awake like a soda can is such a vivid, you know, sonic moment. It's so simple, yet also like in a time where, you know, he's writing about someone else like waking up from an overdose. I don't know. I think that's like this poem is such a good introduction to this entire collection, like for those reasons, because those things kind of never really get into the very like high poetic pretension that sometimes people expect from poetry or want from poetry. In order for it to be like intelligent, there's such an honesty. His voice in these poems, all of them, but in this one specifically, like you are given this poem and you're like, this is how it's gonna go.
He's working with real sentences. You remember when he said that it was like, you know, I wanted to be a novelist, but I was on the bus so much and I was car sick.
Yes.
Reading books, so I read poems, and that's why I read poetry. Like you can see glimmers of like getting rid of the line breaks. A cop, flustered, tugged up his shorts, plunged a needle into a pale thigh. Like it works so well, and it's exactly how some of my favorite fiction writers like.
Yeah, I think also something about this poem and then a few others. Professor Tran, Paul Tran, the great poet, was kind of the one that made like rewired my brain into really focusing on form and like the internal form that isn't as apparent, you know, when you first read. You know, like you can count the lines and you can count, you know, how many syllables and like all of those things, but what really I've become really interested in is like the poetic line itself. I've been reading this book by, I think it's like James Longbeard or something, like The Poetic Line. It's like this like, you know, essays of like, this is how the line works, which I think is really interesting. But for something like this poem and most poems when I'm writing as well, I think about how the line itself can also tell like the truth that maybe isn't apparent in like the whole poem, or it has like moments of like different separate like arguments or like theses, I guess. Like not necessarily that you're making an argument, but sometimes you are. I feel like in a poem you're trying to convince a reader to feel a type of way or to understand something, but also you're trying to like attempt at arguing it for yourself, like that you believe this is to be true. And so like, for example, like the first time I found my brother, and that like sets you up, like just that line implies that there was more times that he finds his brother. It also is like an open line, like there is no punctuation, so it bleeds into the next line. And so the line break, you know, the first time I found my brother could be emotionally found him, you find him, like he was hiding, he was this, but then, you know, the next line goes into overdosed, he looked holy, a thing. And I feel like that's kind of like where you also feel the shift of like, you know, he could have been found doing anything, but he was overdosed, and he looked holy, but he was also a thing. I think that line specifically stands out to me as its own kind of argument. Like he overdosed, he looked holy, but he's also like a thing. And then the later line is not to be touched. And I don't know, I feel like when I'm reading poems, especially like more contemporary poets, I just like feel like I'm honed in on those moments, because I feel like you can really, I mean, especially reading the whole collection later, like you could take the second line of this poem, overdosed, he looked holy, a thing, and you can like track those three things like throughout the entire collection, because he's telling a story of death, overdosing, like addiction, and also like the thing, which can be a million things. Like you don't know what the thing is, but it implies that his brother is a thing,
or like
not to be touched.
Thinking about like how he, because there's somewhere he's reckoning with how he's portraying people, the selfishness that it takes to, so it's like that sort of like they're just a thing for my use. Yeah, especially like, you know, at the end of this poem, he whittles the syringe that saved his brother's life into an instrument only he can play, which is also like, you know, that selfishness, which I'm just in the corner over here watching.
Yeah, like I can't do
taking
anything.
Notes.
Yeah, and I will like, but then also like I'm here to take this part of you that still lives and play it for other people to hear, or for myself to hear, to like give a voice to this brother, his brother who like maybe didn't have a voice or couldn't find a voice, or is a story that no one would ever tell, because there's so much, you know, when it comes to like familial grief, and also when it comes to like addiction and overdosing, and there's so much like shame in telling those stories, even like within your own family, and not telling like a full truth to kind of like hide that feeling. So I don't know, I think that he does a really good job at like being like, this is what I'm gonna write about in this poem, but the lines by themselves also really tell a story.
Well, yeah, we talk about people like Natalie Shapiro or Gabrielle Bates, who always have this like similar thing where you get the poem and then the collection starts like 2 pages later. Yeah. So it does set up the whole thing. It can kind of be the inverse of the whole collection, or it can set you up for the whole collection. Is this a sonnet technically? It's 14 lines. I
do feel like you could read it into like the literal form of a sonnet. Because sometimes it's like, okay, you have 14 lines, inherently puts it into conversation with like sonnet form. And if you like went through and did all of the obviously this then doesn't rhyme, but you could probably find some sort of like internal system that's working within like the frames of the sonnet. Because, you know, I mean, like there is like the last 2 lines, like there's a shift. That's where the question happens, and then the question isn't answered, but it like shifts to like, instead of talking about his brother, he's talking about himself. Yeah, I do think that which he does a lot, he does use a sonnet constantly.
Yeah, no, he uses a lot of like different, and again, this is like, he shifts a lot of things both vertically and horizontally, but this is like the most, right, this is as straightforward as it gets. I mean, there's nothing's broken up. It's just line breaks, and so the precision you have to have with a poem like that has got to be crazy. Like, it has to be perfect.
Yeah, I think someone at the reading like also had asked him like, how do you write like short poems so well or something, because he is like really good at writing a short poem, and I don't think that that's because he's scared to write a long poem, because there are like long poems in here, but I think that he has such a like particular way of telling a story that doesn't need more. Like he knows when to stop from oversharing, you know, every internal thing that he's thinking. It feels like very fine-tuned. But yeah, I mean, like 10 years later you have your first collection.
Yeah,
that's kind of like you're sitting with these poems forever. Yeah, and he'll probably still sit with them. Yeah.
And so one of the main things that, or like something else that kind of carries the collection across is these like elegies.
Mm-hmm.
He has them to a couple different things, but there's the ones that are to the four chambers of his mother's heart, four chambers of his brother's heart, four chambers of his heart. And he has probably like 10 or 12 total scattered across, and they're broken up into parts.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you want to like read and talk about the very last one.
Yes,
But
my favorite one.
yeah, like how did you see them across the collection? Because it seemed like they shifted from maybe focused on himself to focused on his actual like brother and mother to more like a recognition of what they're doing in the work at the very end.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I was thinking about, because they're the same title, they're never really the same poem, and there's like a frequency where you they blend together, but also I've just been thinking about like what it means to be writing an elegy for the four chambers of your own heart or like of other people's hearts.
Yeah, like an elegy being something for like to honor somebody who's passed, right? Like
yeah, and it's like in this collection he'll
interesting,
write towards his mother's heart, which is still presumably around, who is still alive, and he's writing an elegy even for himself,
which is kind of crazy.
Is like it's kind of I think it's really like beautiful and also challenging, because I think what he does too is, he has many elegies, but the one that is actually for the four chambers of his brother's heart,
and that's like page 19.
Yeah, that one's
it's actually broken up into the
sections,
four chambers.
And like that one is also another great example of like how the line itself can tell another story. But I also think specifically with that poem, there's like the internal like structure of it is like the first section or the first stanza is like we are, and then like I, and then the second like those are like the pronouns that are being used, and then the second it's an I and then you, and then the third is a family is the only like human subject in that, and then the final one is just you and God. And I think that is a really interesting thing as the first elegy too, for that kind of like sequence, because what happens is at the end of it, there's only one time where he brings up his father, I think, like one or two times that he brings up his father, and it's talking about his dentist.
Yeah,
and he's like
he's like, this is all it takes for me to have a like want to have a father-son relationship with somebody is to see them twice a year or whatever.
But I think that one was an elegy for his own heart.
I think it was, yeah.
And so that was really interesting to me too. Yeah, my dentist, this is on 47. My dentist is the closest thing I've ever had to a father.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about like, there's four chambers, in your head, it's like should be four people, with four hearts or whatever. But I do think that like one of the chambers kind of symbolizes like the family as a whole, even without like a father. And so he's like writing into these chambers, and I think what the most interesting thing about the chamber, like saying chambers instead of like my brother's heart, like there's four of these chambers, I think it also makes me think of just like the fact that a chamber is also like a cave, it's a cage, it's like all those things that holds the actual heart. I guess there's like valves and all that shit. I don't know biology that well or anatomy, but like it's a difficult thing to escape a chamber, and I think there's something to be said too about like the heart is something that we use to like hold things, like my heart is heavy with these feelings, these emotions, but like real life your heart doesn't really hold anything but blood and like oxygen. And so I don't know, but I do think there's a lot to say about this like trapped feeling as it relates to like the grief. I think
that 1 on 19 kind of echoes the four sections of the book almost too. And like I love we're under the same moon and I'm sick with that knowing. That's like grief at its rawest. Like imagine somebody you can't find, don't know is dead or alive, or just somebody who's dead, like you're still under the same, I don't know. It's such a raw feeling, and then it moves to kind of anger, references like cauliflower ear, so like fighting, anger. What are the 4 stages of grief? 5 stages of grief. I don't know. I'm gonna guess that maybe this kind of lines up, but what do I know?
Oh, maybe. I didn't think about that.
and then, I don't even know what the number is.
I feel like there should be like 12.
We really should have looked into that. Yeah, no. Yeah, 12. You're thinking of 12-step, I think.
Yeah, okay, same thing though.
And then like shadows of buildings, sea of moonlight, like a family quilt. The city is empty. It's sort of like calmness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, camera flashes, famous. God is looking for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're immortalized in this book. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a sort of recognition of. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I love that one. But yeah.
It's also like where I think in terms of the elegies, like that kind of sequence, it's like the first kind of time the like search party is kind of like, at least in those elegies, I think he does bring it up a few different times. There's one where they're playing hide and seek, and he says, "I learned you can lose yourself in someone else's losing." Yeah, that's like, it left me also thinking about like, this is where the search party begins, you know, and he's already late, you know. I think he does have a poem that's named after the same.
It's like the second to last poem. The long one.
Which is a sequence, or a series that is also 4 parts.
Yeah.
So I think all of them are so different, and also so you can still feel the shift of like how he's processing all of these different things, and there's not really like a linear way of understanding it, I think, which mimics, I feel like, the only way you can do that and tell a story about grief and grieve someone is as it comes, I guess.
Let's talk about the very last poem, and then we'll get to the spoon one. But you love this one, and you even had like some other poems to connect it to. Yeah, I didn't really get it until you kind of explained it to me. But that like ice cube thing is brutal. Beautiful. So this is kind of how it ends. So we read you the first one. You can read the last one. Maybe I'll read the spoon one.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one is Elegy for the 4 Chambers of My Mother's Heart. This is an elegy, and believe me, it will end within the same walls of your town home. And because I am selfish, it ends with your words and a memory of just you and me standing above the your kitchen sink, pouring water into an ice cube tray. You tell me to watch as the water fills up one corner, then overflows into every empty square. This, you say, this is how I love you. This one, I was thinking about this one yesterday as I was filling up my ice cube trays. I'm always thinking about this poem. This might have been the one that made me cry.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful, and it's so, this is like a poem where you trust that this is true. Like this, and what I mean by that, I guess, is that he's going out of his way to say, you know, he's mourning a loss that has not happened yet. So he's imagining what he will do without his mother. You know, he's writing an elegy for a heart that is still beating. And then he's like, I'm selfish because how this will all go away is like, you know, when you are gone, it'll just be you and me, which is such a vulnerable thing to think about. I think death also does sometimes make you kind of selfish because and I would say I'm a victim of that, you know, like when someone is gone, you kind of, sometimes you fall into, you know, I didn't do enough, or I didn't do these things, or I wish I had this, I wish I knew this about him, I knew, you know, you go on these things about like these wishings, like this kind of like grieving for something that you couldn't get, and it almost feels like selfish to a point where it's like, who is that for? Like, is that for me to make me feel better?
The person exists in relation to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In your mind, because they only exist. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also what's so beautiful about the ice cube trays. You know, I don't think I ever really like understand that. I think what's so good about it is that it comes back to me every time I do it.
Yeah.
But it's like there's still like a contained amount of love that you could put in an ice cube tray. You know, like it's overflowing into every other square, but the squares are still there, and also like they're gonna be frozen. They're gonna be stuck in time until they come back. Mm-hmm. This poem is such a good testament to like how brilliant of a writer I think that Dawson is.
Just 9 lines.
It's just 9 lines, and it's like
plain language.
Yeah, and I think it also, like this being the final one, leaving on a note with his mother of just him and his mother, instead of, you know, grieving his brother still, or, you know, something like that. It really does show like the progression of what he's writing into and how it's shifted, you know.
And his metaphors are so real.
They're like
you could feel it. You could feel a mother being like, with a little kid, being like, see how these overflow? That's like my heart with love, and being just like a fun, like cute memory, but it kind of hits you.
Like his interiority is on the page, which I think is a really difficult thing to do, and also to like find, especially when you're writing into grief and addiction. It's, you know, because there's so much shame and there's so much guilt, like writing about grief. I feel like this collection made me think of one, Sharon Olds. Yeah, I read Sharon Olds' poem Little Things recently, and that one, she's writing about her daughter going to camp and how she's reminded of her father, and she says something like, I wonder why I think of my father. I try to like think of the beautiful things. I think I learned to love the little things about him because all of the big things I could not love, no one could. It would be wrong to, and that it's like a duty to find things to love, to like keep us in this world, which is, you know, beautiful and stellar and brilliant. And also just, that poem is also like very simple in language, and it makes me think of how Stephen is writing about his brother, you know, like the little things that he finds to write about. Like he's writing about dildos at the Goodwill bins and stuff like that.
There's like humor in a lot of it,
so
even in some of the darkest stuff, like the spoon.
Yeah, the spoon.
Like,
yeah,
it's funny at points. It's like
yeah, and I think that you know, like he's writing into that same kind of feeling of here is what happened, which is also something that like Sharon Olds says, like, do what you will and I will live to write about it, or live to tell about it. Misquoting, but something along the lines of that. Line. Yeah, but it is beautiful because it's like, as a poet, to tell Stephen's story. Like, I could imagine writing poems about my own father who died from addiction, and it's like, I have written them, and I have written a lot of them where it's like, I am angry, or, you know, I can think about a million things that I was mad about, but to go the next step and like confront yourself and be like, but what is it that you remember, that you loved? Because there are a million things about a person you love, even in your anger. Yeah, which I think is beautiful in what Stephen is doing. And then the other poem, Mary Jo Bang's You Were, You Are Elegy, she's writing about her son who also overdosed. And it writes so well into the same kind of stuff that Stephen Espada Dawson is doing, where it's so simple. It's so, here are the things that I love about you that I can remember, and there's nothing really like high lyric about it. It's really just like, I love you like I love all beautiful things, which is, you know, has been said a million times, but you know, there's an argument to be made about how the form of it is working. But I think also the idea that you were and you are is such a beautiful kind of reckoning that you don't really achieve until you've kind of like mastered the grief, I guess. You know, as not that is the right word at all, but I think like getting to a point where it's like, I loved you, I love you. These things don't go away, and that you are still young.
We're getting a lot of pickle ads on this poetry
website. From Russia. Thank you. Yeah, but no, I think that's kind of all I have to say about that one, but I think that one is also so beautiful. It is so slow, the line breaks are, like, the enjambment is very, very powerful in that poem. Yeah, but it's just, I think it's also a different perspective of hearing a mother talk about a son, and I think that, like, pairs very nicely with, especially the last poem in this collection.
And it's such a crazy story, because she has a whole collection centered around her son, right? Yeah. And like whether, you know, was this an accident, was it intentional, like all these questions. And it's like such a crazy, you can have a crazy story, but you have to do something interesting with it.
Yeah, you have to like,
within the collection.
You also just have to be like fully, you have to like
gotta be hard to write about.
Yeah, I feel like I can imagine that writing a collection like that kind of brings, you learn so much more about yourself than you would
about yourself, exactly.
Yeah, it's you know, grief is so...
Think like, oh, that's not my story, what am I going to get for you?
Yeah, but there's a really, like, there's a way to find that, like, interiority of yourself, only, like, through the page.
Yeah.
Because all you can do is sit there with the page and write. And then, you know, when you're done writing, thinking about, is this truthful to, like, yourself, to the people you're writing about, to the, like, people you want to read it? Yeah, which I think is never an easy thing to figure out. It feels like, especially for Stephen, something that he's done. I can trust everything that he's saying, and that it's like as close to the real way that he thinks and feels that you can achieve on a page, which is why I really like this book. Yeah.
I have a question about that. I want to read the spoons one first.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit less, just because I want to get to your stuff. But yeah, okay. This one was like kind of funny the first time I heard it because of the line about the language, but it's pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's probably his most popular. I don't know. I feel like I see.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
it was published much before this was.
Yeah, that's probably why. Yeah. My brother stole every spoon in the house, so we don't eat soup anymore. We tried. The bone broth fell right through our forks. Our fingers stained the carpets. We all learned to speak 12 languages, but only the words for good morning and hospital. In Old Norse, my mom learns the phrase, "Where are all the fucking spoons?" Brian went outside, whispered swears to the poplars. They bent their necks to hear him. Brian went outside and left forever, took the rest of the silverware. Brian went outside and left. 1,000 doodles he drew, every happy animal that wasn't him. We crumpled them like origami roadkill, stomped them under our feet until they became wine between our toes. We're still drinking it now. 10 years later, I don't know how magnets work. If I tied 1,000,000 together, could they pull him here? The cutlery turned, ash in his pockets, heavy metal in his blood. That one's insane. And this has some really interesting form. Maybe I'll ask you about that real quick, just before we get to the idea of because you had a thing about how Richard Siken, was it?
Yeah, shout out Richard Siken. Yeah. But he his formal thought process for at least he tweeted about it once, which famously that's what he does. But that the left margin represents gravity or is gravity, and then the right margin is a divinity. And he says the struggle is to have enough strength and breath to stay in the air as long as you can before falling back to the ground of the left margin. And I don't think it maybe applies to every single poem that you could ever read, why people are using the left and the right margins. But I do always think of that because, in this poem specifically, it works very well because, in my mind, the things that are happening on the right are kind of divine, or a closeness to divinity, a closeness to religion or spiritual metaphor. And I think when I was reading this poem again and thinking about that, really it felt like I just wrote slamming with underlined, but it feels like you're reading and then every time you have to come back to the left margin, you're slammed back into reality, into what is going on in the story. And I think that is such an interesting feeling to create, because I do think it mimics the feelings that this kind of situation would provoke. It's this consistent things are getting good and then they're bad, or things are feeling this type of way and then they're not. It's good morning and hospital, there's shifting that is forced. And also I do see blank space as perhaps where the feeling of grief exists between divinity and earth, I guess, because it's there, but it gets in the way.
And the divinity is so momentary. Mm-hmm. Just little. Yeah. It's almost just one breath.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's then Brian's outside, and Brian's outside again. And yeah, I just think this poem is...
And that line break, Brian went outside and left.
Yeah.
1,000 doodles he drew, that one is crazy.
Every happy animal, that wasn't him. Yeah, it just feels like you have to get checked back into... Yeah, I think that line, every happy animal, that wasn't him, is such a good... Which I feel is also something that he is so good at, is enjambment and making you feel what's coming and it's not what you wanted, I guess.
Yeah. As a poet, because we'll talk about some of your poems now, how does it... Because I imagine, with him, using him as an example, this story is so anchored around and his brother and his mother, and I guess just the idea of family and grief. And I imagine, to write poems like this, which how many are there? There's probably 40 or 50. Mm-hmm. You're writing a million poems that don't make it. A lot of which probably might be really good and just don't fit into the collection. Mm-hmm. So how do you distinguish between, in your eyes, you read a ton of poetry collections, a good collection versus a bunch of good poems in a collection? Right. And I know you're writing a lot about your dad, and some of the stuff you sent me, these all, for example, tie together very well. Obviously you have poems that don't, so if you were to put together a collection someday, you know what I mean? That kind of idea, I don't know. That's not even really a question.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I think I do have things to say about collection. I mean, yeah, I don't have my, I worked on my 695, my thesis with Paul Tran.
And that's real quick. That's like a super cool thing that they have at Wisconsin. Like you get to do
shout out,
like a whole like it's usually 40 pages of poetry or like 70 pages of prose.
Yeah.
As an undergrad.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
Which is basically a manuscript.
Yeah,
for
it's
a
like,
lot of.
Yeah.
So
especially for poetry.
Yeah. But with Professor Tran, that was kind of also something that I, we had talked about when I was writing that, because that was like the most I've ever written in like to a certain like thread or a certain like collection consistently in a few months. But I think what's so beautiful about a collection of poetry is that it doesn't need to be necessarily like thematically connected, but I do think that there is a way to connect poems through like form, but also through like voice and like through the kind of like feelings that you're writing into the stories that you're telling. I don't think there's like one right way or like even like three right ways to like write or put a collection together, but I do think that the reason that this one works so well is that it stays within the confines of three people. There's like maybe a few other subjects that are thrown in, like his uncle and his cousins, and his father, but like very briefly.
Brief,
And so it feels like meditations on himself, his relation to his mother, his relation to his brother, and like what that says about himself. I don't know, just thinking about reaching that point of writing your true voice, your true story is something that I think he really does here, and that's something that isn't always achieved by like you can write a collection with poems, and sometimes collections are like they're here and they're also here and they're like everywhere between of like whatever subject, whatever emotion. It's like that's sometimes can be like totally fine, but I do for my own enjoyment, I do love a book that is like has its like focus or it's like obsession. It feels like this is obsession is so can be like a million things, but it's so confined into just a few things, but so much is said, like everything is said outside of it. That's what I think. I don't know, as I write my own stuff I kind of think about that, because sometimes I write a poem and then I write about my dad again and I'm like, can we stop writing about our dad? Like I don't want to write about this anymore. But sometimes it's like it's a struggle of like writing I have a million poems about my dad, but there's only like 3 that I actually like, because only like 3 of them really get me to where I was trying to get to, which I didn't know until I achieved those things. So that's, I don't know.
So that's interesting, like achieving a sort of like poetry literally being a tool for grieving or like recognizing what's that's super interesting. We have maybe 3 poems here that we'll talk about. Maybe we can just read this third one at the end, because that's my favorite. We'll just cap it off on that.
I think this one is like one of the first poems that I wrote that felt like I was like, when I had first written it and I was talking to Professor Tran about it, I like felt dishonest about the way I was talking about it, because I was like, the actual thing that I wanted to say was the ending where it says, in my wish for you to die. That was the thing that I didn't know if I wanted to say. Okay,
so we'll read 2 of the poems. This first one, can I read I'm going to read the title. We had barbecue, sweet and sour sauce, mozzarella, pepperoni, ground beef, sometimes we had sausage, crispy bacon, and then like we had spinach, artichokes, mushrooms, diced green peppers, chicken, oh my god, I can smell all of it. So that's the title. And this is like seriously a really great poem, but
thank you.
You'll have to view it once it's in the New Yorker or something.
Right.
Okay, so do you want to read like Pink Moon Prayer? We'll talk about it and then we can cap it off with the high functioning. Okay.
I will preface too with this, the title being, it's about my father and his death, and he actually did pass on the day of the pink moon, which happens in April. Which is different from the strawberry moon. It's different from the red moon. It's different from like whatever. But Franny Choi has a really interesting poem called Pink Moon as well. But anyways, when I was writing this poem and the rest of my like 695, a lot of it was really focused on this imagery of the pink moon, like, I don't know, Nick Drake album. It's like there's a lot of good things about the pink moon. Anyways, so this is Pink Moon Prayer. Gone before I woke, you'd set off in your Honda Pilot for the buffet where we ate donut daisies for breakfast. I dipped pineapple in the chocolate fountain. On Sundays, you down another Red Bull in that small, locked office. Your Oxfords, slacks, blue collar, memory smells like cigarettes, vodka, and your coffee. I'm told there is meant to be love between a father and a child. Between us, your silence, my drinking. You spoke to me to ask only for water from a sponge, the body of Christ above your failing body. I hear your sacred words, smoke unfurling, full as the moon that rose. Like you and my wish for you to die, that moon was there until it wasn't.
It's a crazy ending.
Thank you. The original poem that I had was thinking, which this kind of has to go into the next, my high functioning poem. I was one time walking to work at Collectivo on the square, hungover, like last summer.
Yeah.
At like fucking like 5 a.m.
Yeah.
because I had to open, right? And I'm walking up the hill to go to the Capitol, and I'm like thinking about how the hell my alcoholic father did this for so many years.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, and I think, you know, he was a true, you know, alcoholic, so he wasn't ever like not drinking. I don't think he was ever actually like hungover. I don't know how that works, but I like would think about him and I'd be like, God, like I wish I knew how my father did this, like what were his tricks, like what, you know, to like cure a hangover. And so I had started writing about like, you know, just thinking about the religious idea of a father, you know, like I was like, my father who is an alcoholic, please tell me, like I'm praying to you, please tell me how to fix this hangover. But it ended up getting into, you know, this is really how I remember him a lot of the time. It had to do with this, he used to work at Golden Corral, and that's where we used to go and have like buffet breakfast, and he was always there. He was always working, and it was always, you know, that was his thing, is he had that type of working class masculinity that was, I'm doing this for you and my family and my wife and my kids, and so therefore, you know, you can't be mad at me for that. Like I'm providing for you. And now it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you did provide for us, but just like labor and money, and that, you know, the gratefulness is there, but also, you know, there was nothing else there. And the line, your silence, my drinking, before it had said something like, it was like flipped, or it was like repeated. I think it was like my silence, your drinking, your silence, my drinking. And what really ended up feeling more true was that like his silence was there, and now I have the drinking that I do, you know, and like I have the same struggle, not the same struggle, but I do have those, you know, that struggle that comes with growing up with that, growing up in Wisconsin, you know, the culture on alcohol, those things never really go away. But the final stanza and the lines, and my wish for you to die, was one that I didn't have in the original poem. The second draft, like the third draft, like I was like not gonna say that, but I knew that that was true, because there was a point in my life, especially near the end of his life, where I was like, I wish he would just die, because he's suffering, you know, he's struggling, but also I couldn't get myself to care anymore about it, and I felt so guilty about that, because, you know, there was nothing we could do to help him at this point. He was in the hospital for like the 4th time, and it always seemed to happen at the time of my life where I was so busy. It was like finals, I'm in a different city. Like the few first times it happened, I was in a different state, no car, didn't have money for a flight, and you know, I was sitting there being like, do I stop my life for this man I haven't talked to in a while because he's my father, or do I just continue with my life and then just like maybe I just never see him again? And so there's no real answer, but I think what I did feel and what I do, I don't know, I feel guilty for it. I do feel like shame towards it now, but I also understand why I was feeling that type of way, because that shit was hard, that shit was fucked, and I wish it would have not been like that. And so only solution in my head was for him to die so I could start grieving him after he was gone, because I was already stuck grieving him, you know, and he was on this like this thin line of like maybe he'll get better or maybe he won't, but either way he's not the same guy I used to know. And so writing this poem and, you know, working through revisions and actually wanting to achieve a real story, a thing that I'm like truthfully telling, it felt like, because, you know, I also often write about my father, and for a long time I just write him in a negative light, you know, like he did this and this and this, but I'm at this point now where I'm like, I can't just do that, like I can't just act like he was this awful guy who was an alcoholic and smoked cigarettes and was always at work, because he was a nice guy before, and so it felt like I needed to say that I did wish that, you know, and I don't wish that anymore, and I regret wishing that, but yeah, it was the only way I could achieve that, and like really, like, now I get to stare at it every single time I read this poem and think about that, and yeah, that's something like, just like the page is like the only tool for me to do that, because I feel like I know those things, but to write it down and to use it in order to tell your truth is a different story.
That's like such a wonderful explanation. I mean, like,
I was rambling.
That was so good. I especially love like that idea of like labor, because like how American of a trap is that to be like,
yeah,
you know, you can have your crappy life, you can not get along with your kids or your wife, and like, but like the labor is what you like love, and like, and maybe it's not even American, but like I was just reading a Claire Keegan short story, and Ron was talking about it in class, and he was like, all this guy cares about is labor, like he's learned to love labor, just like being like, I work, this is my farm, this is whatever, and he talks it up, and he doesn't think at all about his wife or kids or what he's, and that's such an interesting, not that that's, you know, that's the full scope of the poem, but that's just an interesting thing that just, I mean, that was just yesterday we were talking about.
Oh, that's
so it's funny that.
Yeah, I mean, oh my god, yeah, I think that too. I think of Bell Hooks has her book, The Will to Change, which she's writing about masculinity in men and things like that, and you know, a lot of the time she's writing specifically about like black masculinity, but there's so much, like, there's a moment in one of her essays or one of the chapters where she's talking about the workaholic man, and I remember reading it like a few years ago, and I was like, God, this is my dad. But it's like this addiction. It's like the same as like, you know, in alcoholism, like where it's like you use it to escape the problems that you have, because, you know, there's an excuse. It's like, I'm providing for my family, and it's like, well, yeah, but like your family, you know, like for a long time my dad used to work in Illinois, and my mom would raise us in like outside of Madison. We never saw him, like, ever, like, and it was just like, what is that? Who gains? Like, you just like get to provide for your family that you don't even see. I don't know, it's just weird. Yeah, but that's definitely I think that's a very universal like masculinity thing, especially in the United States. I mean, we are consumers, we are capital, you know.
So, do you want to how does that tie into this poem? I love this one. We can kind of maybe talk about it a little bit before, but I kind of want to cap it off with with this one. So
cool. I think this one goes back to the Pink Moon Prayer one also, because I was thinking about what it means to be a high functioning alcoholic, because so much of my father's life was, when I was growing up, I didn't know he was an alcoholic for a really long time. To a lot of people, super obvious, because of his tendencies, the way he acted, you know. My mother always knew, and like my older brother caught on to it pretty quick, but I like really like didn't know what was going on. And so I was thinking a lot about like everything he was doing.
Drove us to school.
Soccer practice, you know, like, oh my god, like everything he was doing, he was like intoxicated. And you know, I also have my own struggles with like alcohol, and I've like been thinking about it a lot, because one of the biggest things that people talk about is like, oh, you know, like things aren't really a problem until they get in the way of your life, you know, like they get in the way of like going to school or going to class and, you know, going to work. And it's like, you can really, as an alcoholic, as a, like an addict, like you hide those things and you make your life happen in so that you keep this like guise that you like are on the right track, you know.
Yeah. You build your life around it. So
yeah,
technically,
exactly. Yeah. It's like there's always a reason to,
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're still gonna wake up in the morning because you can have a drink, and then you go to work, and then you have a drink. You know, it's like there's always, a trade-off. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking about a lot, and like what it means to be doing that.
I figure the trick is to keep going. I love that.
Yeah, that was the answer to the hangover question. All you can do is just keep drinking.
Yeah.
That's what people do in Wisconsin, you know.
Yeah.
That's why Bloody Marys exist.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah, in brunch. Okay, this one is high functioning. You said we'd find her one day dead. We found you dead first, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I can't stop you. Your body, your liver brain hawk-mauled, uglier than any killed cat. I miss her, sometimes more than you, though she hated me. As if she knew I just want to feel good, be good. My head hurts as I walk to work. I don't know how you did this, how you drove us all to school intoxicated every day. I figure the trick is to keep going. I've tasted men too old for me, lapped up sweat like our barn cat in the sink. I liked my hard water in movement, dripping wet on my whiskers. Don't see her anymore. You let her to the fields and farms someplace in Wisconsin's plains. I used to fear her getting devoured by a hawk, the one on the fence you built. I never wanted her. All I wanted was a hamster, but you said it died too quick. You chose her and made a thing you loved everyone's problem.
Yeah, that's crazy.
This is like the 5th or 6th iteration of that poem.
Shout out that cat. I hope she's doing well.
No, she's definitely dead. Yeah, she's definitely
no.
She might not be though. She was a killer. She used to kill hummingbirds in our backyard.
She might be running shit out in the Wisconsin plains.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, well that was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on here.
Of course, thank you for having me. Had a really good time.
Yeah, no. So yeah, check out this cover is so awesome. Late to the Search Party by Stephen Espada Dawson. If we didn't do a good enough job, these 2 paragraphs on the back from Kaveh Akbar and Roxanne K are probably better.
I think,
and check out B's book when that comes out. I'll keep you posted. Yeah, probably in the next.
Give it a 2 years or so.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon. Peace.